The funeral director was still adjusting the lilies when my daughter-in-law handed me the envelope. "What's this?" I whispered, though I already knew from her expression it wasn't a sympathy card. "Eviction notice," she said, loud enough for the front 2 rows to hear. 72 hours. My hands shook as I unfolded the legal paper. The letterhead was real. The signature was notarized. The date was yesterday, the day we buried my son. "Jennifer, surely we can discuss this after—" "There's nothing to discuss, Margaret." She straightened her black dress like she was tidying up loose ends. "The house is mine now. You have until Friday." The funeral director pretended to busy himself with the guest book, but I caught him glancing our way. Mrs. Chen from next door shifted in her seat. Even the organist looked up from her sheet music. Everyone was watching, and I had nowhere to hide. I folded the papers with hands that belonged to someone else, someone smaller, someone who didn't matter. The woman who'd raised the man in that casket, who'd sung him lullabies and packed his lunches and held his hand through cancer treatments, had just been reduced to a housing problem. "The car service leaves in 10 minutes, Jennifer added, checking her phone. "I assume you'll want to attend the burial?" The flowers weren't even wilted yet. I tucked the eviction notice into my purse, next to the tissue packet I'd brought for tears. I hadn't expected to need tissues for this kind of crying. What should I do now? If you've ever felt like a stranger in your own family's eyes, you'll understand what comes next. 3 years ago, when David was first diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I moved in to help. Not because anyone asked me to, because that's what mothers do. "Just for a few months, Mom, until we get our routine down." That's what he said. Jennifer smiled and nodded, squeezed my hand across their granite kitchen island. Of course, family takes care of family. I should have listened to the way she said family, like it was a word she was trying on for size. The first month I was useful. I drove David to his appointments when Jennifer couldn't leave work. I made his favorite soup when the chemo stole his appetite. I sat with him during the bad hours, the ones where he couldn't keep anything down and didn't want to scare the kids. "You're a blessing, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without you." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But somewhere around month 4, when David's hair was gone and his weight had dropped to 140, something shifted. Jennifer started handling his medications herself. She took over his insurance paperwork. She drove him to doctor visits I wasn't invited to anymore. "It's too much stress for you, Margaret. David thinks you should rest." When I asked David directly, he looked away. "Jen's just trying to protect you. The medical stuff is complicated. The medical stuff." As if I hadn't raised him through childhood pneumonia, broken bones, and every fever that came with being a boy. As if I hadn't been the one to notice the yellowing around his eyes that led to the diagnosis in the first place. I should have seen the trap closing. The changes came slowly. My name disappeared from the emergency contact forms, then from the bank statements that used to come to the house. Jennifer explained it away, always with reason, always with David nodding along. "We're streamlining everything, making it easier to manage. Mom, you don't need to worry about this stuff. Just focus on feeling better. Feeling better." I wasn't the one who was sick, but I was getting smaller. That's how it felt. Like someone was turning down my volume dial day by day, until even I started to doubt what I was hearing. When David's condition worsened last spring, Jennifer suggested I sign a power of attorney. Just temporary, for medical decisions, if he can't make them himself. You understand. The lawyer, Jennifer's lawyer, explained it in terms that sounded reasonable. David was too weak to handle complex decisions. Someone needed legal authority to act quickly if there was an emergency. "It's what David wants, Mom. He specifically asked for this." I looked at my son, propped up in his hospital bed, tubes snaking from his nose. He couldn't keep his eyes open for more than a few minutes at a time. "Do you want this, David?" "Whatever Jen thinks is best. She handles all this now." I signed. What mother wouldn't? 2 weeks later, Jennifer used that power of attorney to refinance their house. Our house, I'd started thinking of it. The place where I'd been making their breakfasts and folding their laundry and reading bedtime stories to my grandchildren for over 2 years. Still, we needed to access the equity for David's treatment. The experimental therapy isn't covered by insurance. The numbers didn't make sense to me. Experimental therapy that cost $60,000 when David was barely strong enough to walk to the bathroom. These decisions are complex, Margaret. David and I discussed it thoroughly, but David slept 20 hours a day. When had they discussed anything thoroughly? I started keeping track, small things at first, the dates on medical bills that didn't match appointment schedules I remembered. Phone calls Jennifer took in the garage, away from the rest of us. The way she'd close her laptop whenever I walked into the kitchen. My name disappeared from everything. The gas bill, the electric bill, even the Netflix account I'd been using to watch shows with the kids suddenly needed a new password I wasn't given. "Oh, we're switching to a family plan. I'll set up your account later." Later never came. 3 months before David died, Jennifer broached the subject of after. "I know this is hard to think about, but we need to be practical. The house, the finances, the kids' routines." We were sitting in David's hospital room while he dozed between pain medication doses. The afternoon light made everything look washed out, like a photograph someone had left in the sun too long. "I don't want to think about after." "I know, but David does. He wants to make sure everyone's taken care of." She pulled out a folder. Legal documents, thick and official looking. He's updated his will to make things simpler. I didn't read it then. I should have, but the thought of planning for my son's death while he was breathing 2 feet away felt like betrayal. "He wants you to know you'll always have a place here. With us. With the kids." The relief was so sharp it hurt. A place here. Home. That's what I'd hoped. "Of course, your family." She said it again, that word, and again. Something in her voice didn't match the meaning. Jennifer reached across and patted my hand. The same gesture she'd made 3 years earlier when I first moved in to help. "David specifically wanted me to tell you, you'll always belong here." I held on to those words through everything that came after. The long nights when David couldn't breathe without an oxygen tank. The morning we had to call the ambulance because he'd fallen in the bathroom and I couldn't lift him alone. The day he stopped eating altogether. "You'll always belong here." When David died on October 15th, Jennifer was the one holding his hand. I was in the hallway on the phone with his insurance company about a claim they'd rejected. Even at the end, she was managing the details, keeping me at arm's length from the important moments. The funeral arrangements happened without me. Jennifer had preferences about flowers, about music, about who would speak at the service. She had opinions about guest lists and catering, and whether we should do a burial or cremation. David discussed all of this with me. He had very specific wishes. I didn't argue. Grief makes you compliant in ways you don't expect. You defer to whoever seems most capable of handling the details you can't bear to face. But I kept thinking about those words. "You'll always belong here." Right up until the moment she handed me the eviction notice. The woman who promised I'd always have a home had just made me homeless in front of everyone who'd come to mourn my son. My name had disappeared from everything. But things didn't stop there. The morning after the funeral, Jennifer stood in my bedroom doorway, holding 3 garbage bags. "I need you packed by noon. The movers come at 2. Movers? For David's things, and yours, obviously. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like I was a house guest who'd overstayed my welcome, rather than the woman who'd been paying utilities and buying groceries for 3 years. I started with the dresser, my medication bottles, the reading glasses David had bought me last Christmas, the photo of him and his father from when he was 8 years old. At Stays Here, Jennifer was watching from the hallway, checking items off a list on her phone. It's a family photo. It's my family photo. I'm his mother. And I'm his widow. The photo stays. I set it back on the dresser, my hands shaking. Not from grief this time, from something sharper, something I didn't have words for yet. The jewelry box came next. I'd kept it on the nightstand since moving in, the one David's father gave me for our anniversary 32 years ago. Inside was my wedding ring, the one I'd stopped wearing when arthritis made it painful, but kept close for the weight of the memory. The ring wasn't there. I lifted the small dividers, checked the velvet compartments twice. The pearl earrings from David's graduation, the tiny diamond pendant his father had saved 6 months to buy, all there, but not the wedding ring. Did you move my wedding ring? Jennifer looked up from her phone. What ring? My wedding ring, from the jewelry box. It was right here yesterday. I haven't touched your jewelry. Her voice carried that particular tone people use when they're telling you a truth that isn't the whole truth. Technical accuracy wrapped around something else entirely. My wedding ring wasn't in the jewelry box. The packing took 4 hours. Every item felt like a negotiation. The coffee mug David bought me on Mother's Day, allowed. The throw blanket I'd crocheted for the living room couch, contested. The small cactus I'd been watering on the kitchen windowsill for 3 years, apparently part of the house staging. By 3 o'clock, everything I owned fit into the back seat of my Honda Civic. 47 years of motherhood reduced to what could fit in a car older than my grandson. The Comfort Inn on Route 9 had weekly rates and didn't require credit checks for cash payments. The room smelled like industrial disinfectant and cigarettes. The bedspread was mustard-colored and stained. You staying long? The desk clerk was young, with the forced brightness that comes from dealing with people who clearly don't want to be there. I'm not sure yet. Weekly rates are better than daily if you're looking at more than 4 nights. I did the math. Social Security didn't come for another 2 weeks. My savings account might cover a month if I was careful. Can I decide tomorrow? Sure thing, honey. The credit cards were all in her name now. I'd helped build the credit rating Jennifer used to refinance their house, co-signing for their first car loan when David was still in graduate school. Now I couldn't even book a decent hotel room. I tried to call Emma that first night. Her number went straight to voicemail. Hi, it's Grandma. I wanted to check on you after today. Call me back when you get this. She didn't call back. I tried again the next morning, a recorded message I'd never heard before. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. I checked the number twice. The same one I'd been calling for 2 years. The cell phone Jennifer bought Emma for her 13th birthday. I tried Tyler's number next. Same message. Both kids unreachable overnight. When I called the house, my old house, Jennifer's house now, the phone rang 8 times before Jennifer answered. What do you want, Margaret? I'm trying to reach the kids. Their numbers aren't working. We changed their phones. New family plan. Can I have the new numbers? I don't think that's a good idea right now. They're my grandchildren. They need time to process everything. The funeral was very hard on them. It was hard on all of us. That's why we should stick together. Margaret, I think you need to focus on getting your own life sorted out. The kids have school and therapy appointments. They don't need additional stress. as if loving your grandmother was a burden children needed protection from. When can I see them? We'll figure something out later, when things settle down. Later. The same word she'd used about the Netflix password, about setting up my account, about all the small promises that never materialized. I hung up, but I didn't stop trying. Over the next 3 days, I called the house 6 more times. Sometimes Jennifer answered with variations of the same brush-off. Sometimes the phone just rang until voicemail picked up. This is the Patterson family. We're not available right now, but your call is important to us. Except I wasn't important enough for a return call, and I wasn't family enough to be included in their new phone plan. The number you've dialed is no longer in service. By Tuesday, the isolation was complete. No contact with my grandchildren, no access to the house where I'd lived for 3 years, no wedding ring, no family photos, no connection to the life I'd built since my husband died. I sat in my motel room and tried to make sense of the math. $500 for a lawyer consultation, $25 for the parking ticket, $43 for another week at the motel. My Social Security check wouldn't cover all of it. I thought about calling my sister in Arizona, but what would I say? That I'd been evicted by my own daughter-in-law? That I'd somehow managed to become homeless while helping raise my grandchildren? The shame was almost worse than the fear. On Thursday morning, I drove to Westfield Legal Aid. The building was older than expected, with fluorescent lights that flickered and chairs that looked donated from bankruptcy sales. The intake coordinator was kind but overwhelmed. She handed me a clipboard with forms written in legal language that might as well have been foreign. Do you have documentation of your housing arrangement? Documentation? A lease, rental agreement, proof of tenancy? I thought about the verbal promises, the handshake agreements, the understanding that family doesn't make each other sign papers. It was informal. I was helping with my son's medical care. Any written agreements, even emails? I shook my head. Utility bills in your name, mail delivered to that address? Everything had been streamlined, Jennifer's word. My name removed from the complications of adult life. Mrs. Patterson, without documentation of tenancy rights, this becomes very difficult, especially when the property owner has clear title. Clear title. Legal language for Jennifer owns everything, and I own nothing. What can I do? You could try negotiating informally. Sometimes family disputes resolve without court involvement. Family disputes. As if this was an argument over holiday plans, rather than the systematic dismantling of my life. And if she won't negotiate? Then you'll need a lawyer who specializes in elder law. Initial consultations usually run between $200 and $500. $500. Half my monthly income for a conversation about rights I might not have. I didn't understand any of it. The legal requirements, the documentation, the difference between informal agreements and binding contracts. I'd believed that doing right by people meant they'd do right by you. I walked out with the same stack of forms I'd walked in with, only heavier now, like homework from a class I'd never signed up for, in a subject I was too old to learn. The parking meter had expired. The citation under my windshield was $25, a quarter of my weekly motel budget. Even the city was taking from me now. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Friday afternoon, while I was sitting on a motel bed trying to figure out how to make $37 last until my Social Security check arrived, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. The only people who called me these days were bill collectors and robocalls, trying to sell me Medicare supplements. But something made me pick up. Mrs. Patterson? The voice was professional, crisp. A man, probably middle-aged, with the kind of careful diction that comes from years of delivering important news. Yes? This is Robert Chen from Chen and Associates. I'm calling about your son David's estate. Estate. Such a formal word for the mess Jennifer had left behind. I think there's been a mistake. My daughter-in-law is handling everything. Actually, Mrs. Patterson, that's why I'm calling. We need to meet immediately. Immediately. The word hung in the air like a challenge. I don't understand. Jennifer said the will was simple. Everything goes to her and the kids. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to ask you to trust me for just a moment. Are you somewhere private where we can talk? I looked around the motel room. Thin walls, neighbor's television bleeding through. The sound of traffic on Route 9. Private wasn't the word I'd use. It's just me. Good. Mrs. Patterson, your son came to see me 6 months before he died. He established a revocable living trust with very specific provisions. Provisions that his wife is not aware of. My hands went cold. What kind of provisions? The kind that activate when certain trigger events occur, like an attempt to evict a protected beneficiary from the family residence. Protected beneficiary. I repeated the phrase in my head, testing its weight. I don't understand legal language very well. That's exactly what David thought you'd say. Mrs. Patterson, your son knew his wife better than she realized, and he protected you better than she knows. The certainty in his voice was like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. Can you meet me tomorrow, Saturday morning, 10 o'clock? My office is downtown, but I can come to you if transportation is an issue. Transportation. He was being polite about the obvious. That I was probably broke, probably scared, probably desperate enough to meet a stranger in a motel parking lot if it meant hope. Your office is fine. Mrs. Patterson, don't mention this conversation to anyone yet, especially not to your daughter-in-law. The line went dead. I sat there holding my phone for 20 minutes, replaying every word. Protected beneficiary, trigger events, provisions that his wife is not aware of. David had planned for this exact scenario. Saturday morning, Chen and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown that had probably been elegant once. The elevator creaked, and the hallway smelled like old coffee and copy toner. But Robert Chen's office was immaculate. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with a kind of precise haircut and expensive glasses that suggested competence. Behind him, law books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Mrs. Patterson, thank you for coming. Please have a seat. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. On the desk was a thick manila folder with my name written across the tab in David's familiar handwriting. Before we begin, I need to verify your identity. Can you show me a driver's license? I fumbled with my purse. My hands were shaking again, not from grief this time, but from something that felt dangerously close to hope. He checked my license against a photocopy in the folder, then nodded. Mrs. Patterson, your son was very specific about when and how you should be contacted. The trust documents I'm about to show you were sealed until certain conditions were met. What conditions? An attempt by his surviving spouse to remove you from the family residence without your consent. He opened the folder. The first page was thick, cream-colored paper with an embossed letterhead. Last will and testament of David Michael Patterson, in formal script across the top. This is the will Jennifer probably showed you or referenced. It's perfectly valid, but it only covers assets not already placed in trust. He turned to the next section. More cream-colored paper, but different headings. Patterson Family Revocable Living Trust, dated 8 months before David's death. This is what she doesn't know about. I leaned forward, trying to read the dense legal language. Words like grantor and successor trustee, and irrevocable provisions upon grantor's death swam in front of my eyes. I don't understand most of this, Let me explain the parts that matter. Your son placed the house, his life insurance proceeds, and his retirement accounts into this trust before he died. The trust has 3 beneficiaries: his wife, his children, and you. But Jennifer said the house was hers. The house is held in trust. She has the right to live in it and manage it, but she cannot sell it, refinance it, or remove other beneficiaries without unanimous consent from the Board of Trustees. Who are the trustees? Originally, it was your son and his wife together. Upon his death, the trust appointed me as primary trustee, with your daughter-in-law as secondary trustee, and you as the third. The words were starting to make sense, like a puzzle where the pieces suddenly clicked into place. So Jennifer can't just evict me. Not only can she not evict you, Mrs. Patterson, but her attempt to do so has triggered what your son called the nuclear option. Even in legal documents, David had kept his sense of humor. What does that mean? Robert Chen reached for another document, this one with red-tabbed sections. It means that any attempt by the secondary trustee to bypass, intimidate, or remove the elder beneficiary results in the immediate freezing of all trust assets, removal of her management privileges, and activation of the Elder Protection Protocol. Elder Protection Protocol? Your son was very specific, Mrs. Patterson. If his wife ever tried to push you out, she'd lose access to everything except her personal belongings and a modest monthly allowance. The house, the insurance money, the retirement accounts, all of it would be administered by the primary trustee until a formal family mediation could be arranged. I stared at him. You're saying that by evicting me, Jennifer lost control of her own assets? I'm saying that your son knew exactly what kind of person he'd married, and he planned accordingly. The room went very quiet. Outside the window, I could hear traffic, normal people going about their Saturday errands. Inside this office, my entire life was being reorganized by papers my son had signed months before he died. Mrs. Patterson, there's more. The trust also authorizes me to provide you with immediate emergency housing assistance, legal representation, and living expenses until the situation is resolved. Living expenses? David set aside $50,000 specifically for your care in the event that his wife became difficult. Such a polite word for what Jennifer had done. Is this legal? Can she challenge it? She can try, but your son was very thorough. He had the trust reviewed by 3 different law firms before he signed it. It's bulletproof. I thought about the eviction notice, about the funeral home lobby, about Jennifer's confident voice as she explained why I had to leave. Every paper she made me sign worked against her. What happens now? Robert Chen smiled. It was the first genuine smile anyone had given me since David died. Now, Mrs. Patterson, we call your daughter-in-law and explain the new rules. The phone call happened that afternoon. Robert Chen had spent an hour walking me through the legal procedures, the timeline, the documentation we'd need. Now he sat across from his desk with Jennifer's number pulled up on his office phone. Mrs. Patterson, I want you to understand what's happening before I make this call. As of yesterday, when I filed the trust violation report with the court, your daughter-in-law lost access to all trust assets. The bank accounts are frozen. She can't write checks, make withdrawals, or authorize any financial transactions. I stared at him. She doesn't know yet. The freeze was implemented electronically this morning. She'll find out when she tries to use the debit card or access online banking. She couldn't touch a penny now. The thought should have felt satisfying. Instead, it felt surreal. For 3 years, Jennifer had controlled every aspect of the family's financial life. She paid the bills, managed the insurance, authorized the medical treatments. Now, suddenly, she had less access to David's money than I did. What about the house? The property management reverts to the primary trustee, that's me, until the family mediation is completed. She can continue living there, but she cannot make any changes to the household composition without trustee approval. Household composition? She cannot evict anyone, move anyone in, or alter the living arrangements without written consent from the Board of Trustees. I thought about the garbage bags, about the 3-hour ultimatum, about the way she'd watched me pack my life into the back seat of my Honda. So I can go back? Mrs. Patterson, not only can you go back, but the trust authorizes me to ensure your comfortable return. That includes restoring your bedroom, replacing any personal items that may have been removed, and providing you with a monthly living allowance until the family situation stabilizes. Monthly living allowance. It had been so long since I'd had my own money. Money I didn't have to ask permission to spend. How much? $1,800 a month, plus all reasonable medical expenses. I'd been living on Social Security, $1,137, for the past 4 years. Jennifer had convinced me it was enough, that the family covered everything else I needed. That's more than I've had in years. David was very specific about your dignity, Mrs. Patterson. He wanted to make sure you'd never feel like a charity case or a burden. The word burden hit something deep in my chest. How many times had Jennifer made me feel like I was imposing? How many small sacrifices had I made to avoid seeming greedy or demanding? Robert Chen picked up his office phone. Are you ready for this? I nodded. He dialed Jennifer's number. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Hello? Mrs. Patterson, this is Robert Chen from Chen and Associates. I'm calling about your late husband's estate. A pause. I think there's been some mistake. David's estate was handled through Whitman and Associates. Whitman handled the probate will. I'm calling about the revocable living trust your husband established with our firm. I don't know what you're talking about. I have your mother-in-law here. As of this morning, the trust has initiated elder protection protocols due to your violation of beneficiary protection clauses. My what? Jennifer's confidence was cracking. Your attempt to remove Mrs. Margaret Patterson from the family residence without proper authorization. That woman is not entitled to live in my house. Actually, it's not your house. The property is held in trust, and Mrs. Margaret Patterson has residential rights that cannot be terminated without unanimous trustee consent. I could hear Jennifer breathing fast through the speaker. This is ridiculous. David left everything to me and the kids. David left personal effects through the will. The house, life insurance, and retirement accounts were placed in trust with provisions for all beneficiaries. I want to see these documents. Of course. But first, all trust assets have been frozen pending resolution. You'll need to appear Monday morning at 9 a.m. for mandatory compliance meeting. Frozen? The bank accounts, insurance funds, investment portfolio. Nothing can be accessed until we resolve the elder protection issue. You can't do this. Your husband could do this, and he did. I'll see you Monday morning. Robert Chen hung up. The silence in the office was profound. Outside, a car alarm was going off, and someone was shouting about parking spaces. Normal Saturday afternoon sounds, but inside this room, I felt like the axis of my world had just shifted. How did she sound to you? Scared and angry. She's about to discover how much of her life was dependent on trust assets she didn't know existed. What happens Monday? We explain the rules. She can contest the trust provisions, but that would require hiring her own attorney and proving either that David was mentally incompetent when he signed the documents, which is impossible given the medical records, or that the trust was created under duress, which is equally impossible. And if she agrees to the family mediation, Then we work out a long-term arrangement that protects everyone's rights. You get to stay in the house, she keeps her management role within reasonable boundaries, and the kids get the stability they need. And if she doesn't agree, then the trust will appoint a neutral property manager, provide you with alternative housing assistance, and Jennifer will receive her monthly allowance until the children reach 18, but she'll have no control over the major assets. I tried to imagine Jennifer accepting any arrangement where she wasn't in complete control. It seemed impossible. She's going to fight this. Probably, but Mrs. Patterson, she's fighting with a pencil while you're holding a cannon. Robert Chen opened a new folder, this one labeled Implementation Protocol. Now let's talk about Monday. I want you to understand exactly what's going to happen and what your rights are. You're not powerless anymore, Mrs. Patterson. He was right. For the first time since David's diagnosis, I wasn't dependent on Jennifer's goodwill or limited by her interpretation of what was fair. I had an attorney, a trust fund, and legal protections I'd never known existed. What do I need to do? First, we're going to document everything that's happened since David's death. The eviction notice, the removal of your personal items, the phone number changes, the restricted access to your grandchildren, all of it. Why? Because if Jennifer tries to challenge the trust, we'll need to demonstrate a pattern of elder abuse and financial manipulation. Every phone call you couldn't make, every personal item she confiscated, every time she made you feel like you were begging for basic dignity. All of that becomes evidence of why David's protections were necessary. I thought about the wedding ring, about the photo of David and his father, about the way Jennifer had made me feel grateful for permission to live in the house where I'd been paying utilities. Second, we're going to arrange for your return to the house, not as Jennifer's dependent houseguest, but as a protected beneficiary with legal standing. When? Tuesday morning. I'll be there with the court order, and we'll have a sheriff's deputy to ensure everything goes smoothly. Official authority. No arguments, no negotiations, no begging for permission. She's not going to like this. Mrs. Patterson, she's about to learn that what she likes is no longer the deciding factor in your life. This time, I had a plan. Robert Chen handed me a business card with his direct number written on the back. Call me if anything happens between now and Monday. Anything at all. And Mrs. Patterson? Yes? Your son was very proud of you. He told me so when he signed these papers. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. Tuesday morning arrived with unseasonable clarity. I met Robert Chen and Deputy Martinez in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot 3 blocks from the house. She was 40-something with the calm competence that comes from handling family disputes that have escalated beyond words. Ma'am, we're here to make sure everyone follows the law. No intimidation, and no one prevents you from accessing property that's legally yours. She handed me a business card with the sheriff's department number. If there are any problems after today, you call that number directly. At 9:47 a.m., we pulled into the driveway of the house where I'd lived for 3 years. Jennifer's car was there, along with a silver SUV I didn't recognize. The front yard looked exactly the same. My azaleas, the mailbox David had repainted last spring. But I wasn't the same person who'd been escorted out 5 days ago. Robert Chen carried a leather portfolio thick with court documents. Deputy Martinez walked beside me, her radio crackling softly with dispatcher chatter. We weren't sneaking or asking permission. We were serving legal notice. I rang the doorbell. Jennifer opened the door wearing a cream-colored sweater and the expression people get when they're trying to appear calm while everything falls apart. Margaret, I wasn't expecting you. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Deputy Martinez with the Sheriff's Department. I have a court order regarding residential access to this property. Jennifer's eyes went from me to the deputy to Robert Chen. What court order? Robert Chen stepped forward. This is a compliance order issued by Judge Helena Morrison in family court. It restores Mrs. Margaret Patterson's residential rights as a protected beneficiary of the Patterson Family Trust. He handed Jennifer a thick envelope sealed with the court's official stamp. You're required to allow Mrs. Patterson immediate access to her personal belongings and living quarters. Any interference with this order constitutes contempt of court. Jennifer broke the seal and scanned the first page. I watched her face change as she read. Confusion, then anger, then something that looked like fear. This can't be legal. It's completely legal, ma'am. You can verify it by calling the court clerk's office. The officer handed her the court order. I don't understand. This house is mine. Actually, Mrs. Patterson, the house is held in trust. And the trust has very specific provisions about protected beneficiaries. Jennifer looked past us into the driveway, probably noticing the neighbors who'd come out to water their plants or check their mailboxes. Mrs. Chen from next door was pretending to deadhead her roses, while obviously watching our conversation. Can we discuss this inside? Of course. We stepped into the living room I'd helped decorate, where I'd read bedtime stories to Emma and Tyler, where I'd sat with David during his bad days. Everything looked exactly the same, except for one detail. The family photos on the mantelpiece had been rearranged. The ones with me in them, David's graduation, Christmas morning with the grandchildren, my 70th birthday dinner, were gone. But I wasn't here for sentiment. Robert Chen opened his portfolio on the coffee table. Mrs. Patterson, yesterday you attended the mandatory compliance meeting. Today we're implementing the court-ordered residential restoration. This is insane. David would never have wanted this. That's when I found my voice. Actually, Jennifer, David planned for exactly this. She turned to look at me, and for the first time since the funeral, I met her eyes without flinching. He knew exactly what kind of person you were, and he knew exactly what you'd do to me after he died. That's not true. He told his attorney about the power of attorney you made him sign when he was too weak to read it, about the refinancing you did without telling me, about the way you gradually cut me out of every decision. Jennifer's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He knew you'd try to push me out the moment the funeral was over, so he protected me in the only way that would work against someone like you. Someone like me? Someone who sees family as a resource to be managed rather than people to be loved. He knew exactly what you'd do. Robert Chen cleared his throat. Mrs. Patterson, the court order, specifies that Mrs. Margaret Patterson's belongings must be restored to her bedroom within 24 hours. That includes any personal items that were removed from common areas. What personal items? The family photographs, for instance. Mrs. Patterson has documented which specific photos were in this room before her temporary displacement. I pulled out my phone and showed Jennifer the pictures I'd taken during David's last weeks. There, on the mantelpiece, were all the missing frames. You documented the room? I documented everything, Jennifer. The bank statements you stopped showing me, the medical appointments you didn't invite me to, the way you changed the Netflix password and gradually locked me out of the life I'd been living here for 3 years. Her face was pale now. The trust attorney has copies of all of it. Every small cruelty, every dismissive comment, every time you made me feel like a guest in my own son's house. David asked me to keep track because he knew you'd claim later that none of it happened. He told you to spy on me? He told me to protect myself because he knew his wife better than she knew herself. Deputy Martinez had been standing quietly near the door, but now she stepped forward. "Ladies, I need to inform you that this conversation is being recorded for legal purposes. Mrs. Patterson," she looked at Jennifer, "you have the legal right to remain in this house as long as you comply with the trust provisions. Mrs. Patterson," she looked at me, "you have the legal right to live here as a protected beneficiary. The court expects both of you to work out practical arrangements through family mediation." Jennifer sank into the armchair where David used to sit for his breathing treatments. "How much of the money is frozen?" Robert Chen consulted his notes. "All trust assets. That includes the life insurance payout, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, and the proceeds from the second mortgage you obtained using the power of attorney." "The second mortgage?" I stared at her. "You took out a second mortgage?" "For David's medical expenses." David's medical expenses were covered by insurance and Medicare. I checked. Jennifer looked from me to Robert Chen to Deputy Martinez. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. "Where did that money go, Jennifer?" We had debts, credit cards, the kids' school tuition." "How much debt?" $63,000. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You used David's illness to steal $63,000? "It wasn't stealing, it was family money. It was trust money. And using a fraudulent power of attorney to access trust assets is embezzlement." Robert Chen's voice was quiet but clear. "Mrs. Patterson, the court will be reviewing all financial transactions made under the power of attorney. If irregularities are found, they'll be referred to the district attorney's office." Jennifer's hands were shaking. "This is my house. These are my children. You can't just destroy my life." "I'm not destroying anything, Jennifer. I'm just refusing to let you destroy mine." Through the living room window, I could see Mrs. Chen had been joined by the Rodriguezes from across the street. They weren't even pretending to do yard work anymore. They were standing on their front porch, watching our conversation unfold. The neighbors saw everything. Deputy Martinez checked her watch. "Mrs. Patterson, do you have any questions about the court order?" Jennifer shook her head. "Then I'll leave you both to work out the practical details." "Mrs. Patterson," she looked at me, "your attorney has my direct number if there are any problems." After they left, Jennifer and I sat in the living room, where we'd shared thousands of ordinary moments. Morning coffee, evening news, homework help with Emma and Tyler. Now we were strangers negotiating a truce. What happens next? Next, you learn to live with the consequences of your choices. And the kids? The kids get their grandmother back. Whether they get their mother back depends on whether you can learn to treat people like family instead of assets to be managed. Jennifer stared at the coffee table where Robert Chen had spread out the court documents. "I never meant for it to go this far." "Yes, you did. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You just didn't expect anyone to fight back." I stood up and walked toward the staircase. "I'm going to unpack my things now, in my room, in my house." For the first time in 5 days, I climbed the stairs without asking permission. The changes started within hours. That afternoon, while I unpacked, I heard Jennifer on the phone in the kitchen below. Her voice carried a different quality now, smaller, more careful. "No, I understand. The trust is handling all major financial decisions now." I couldn't hear the other side, but I could fill in the blanks. Bank manager, insurance company, someone learning about trustees and frozen assets. "Yes, I'll need to check with the attorney before I can authorize anything over $50. Robert Chen had been thorough. Jennifer could buy groceries and pay utilities, but everything else required approval from the primary trustee. Now she needed my permission. When I came downstairs, Jennifer was at the kitchen table with bills and a calculator. Her laptop showed account balances she could see but couldn't touch. The mortgage payment bounces next week, unless the trustee authorizes it. I poured coffee from the pot she'd made. Robert said he'd handle existing bills while we work out family mediation. And after that? After that, we'll see how well you can follow the rules you tried to make me live by. For the first time since I'd known her, Jennifer seemed genuinely uncertain. What does that mean? It means you'll ask instead of demand. You'll include instead of exclude. You'll treat me like family instead of like a problem to be managed. Jennifer's face changed when I mentioned the kids. They've been asking about you since the funeral. What did you tell them? That you needed time alone to grieve, that you were staying with friends. They didn't believe you. Tyler asked if you were mad at us. He wanted to know if he did something wrong. An 8-year-old boy thinking he'd driven away his grandmother. What are you going to tell them now? Jennifer was quiet, staring at the bills. The truth, I guess, that we had a disagreement about living arrangements and were working it out. The doorbell rang at 4:30. Through the window, I could see a yellow school bus pulling away. Emma and Tyler were walking up the path, backpacks slung over shoulders. Jennifer looked at me. Are you ready for this? I've been ready for 5 days. She opened the door. Hi, Mom. How was... Emma stopped mid-sentence when she saw me standing behind Jennifer. Her face went through surprise, confusion, then relief. Grandma? Hi, sweetheart. Tyler pushed past his sister and wrapped his arms around my waist without hesitation. He smelled like playground dirt and apple juice. Where have you been? Mom said you were at a friend's house, but you don't have friends. Tyler, I mean, you have us. Why would you need other friends? I looked at Jennifer over Tyler's head. Sometimes adults have disagreements, honey. Your mom and I needed a few days to work things out. Emma was still in the doorway, studying both of us with teenage attention to family drama. Are you moving back in? I never moved out, Emma. This is my home too. But your room was empty. Mom put the bed in storage. We'll get your furniture back this weekend. Jennifer's voice was quiet. Can we help you move it back? Tyler was still holding my waist like he was afraid I might disappear again. I'd like that very much. Emma stepped into the house and closed the door. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you and Mom going to keep fighting? I looked at Jennifer, then back at Emma. 13 years old and already wise enough to know that adult disagreements usually meant more than anyone was willing to admit. We're going to try very hard not to, sweetheart. Tyler looked up at me with David's eyes. Does this mean you're not going anywhere? I'm not going anywhere, Tyler. This is where I belong. He hugged me tighter. Good, because Emma and I missed you a lot. They asked why I'd been away so long. Over dinner that night, pizza that Jennifer ordered because neither of us felt like cooking, the kids filled me in on everything I'd missed. Emma's research project on family history, Tyler's lost tooth, and the confused tooth fairy who only left 50 cents. Small things, ordinary things, the daily details that make up a childhood and a family. When Tyler asked if I would read him a bedtime story, I looked at Jennifer. Is that okay with you? Of course it's okay. You're their grandmother. For the first time since David died, someone said that like it meant something important. After the kids went to bed, Jennifer and I stood in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. They really did miss you. I missed them too. I know this is going to take time, working things out, I mean. Yes, it is. But they need stability. They need to know their family isn't falling apart. I closed the dishwasher and turned to look at her. Then we'd better make sure it doesn't. 3 months later, I had a routine that was mine. Every morning, I made coffee at 7:30 before Jennifer came downstairs. I read the newspaper with my reading glasses. When the kids got up, I made Tyler's lunch and reminded Emma about violin practice. I belonged here again, but on my own terms. The family mediation sessions helped us establish respectful cohabitation protocols. Jennifer couldn't make decisions about household expenses over $50. We took turns cooking dinner. We both had equal say affecting Emma and Tyler. The children adapted faster than expected. Tyler never asked why I'd been away. Emma stopped looking worried when Jennifer and I talked about groceries or conferences. They understood we were trying harder to be kind. My bedroom felt like mine again. The furniture was back from storage, the bed David helped me pick out, the dresser where I kept my medication, the chair by the window where I could call my sister without worrying who might be listening. I could breathe in my own home again. The $1,800 monthly allowance meant I didn't have to ask permission to buy new shoes or replace my winter coat. Small freedoms, but after financial dependence, they felt enormous. Jennifer and I weren't friends. We probably never would be, but we'd learned to share space without competing for control. We could disagree about bedtimes without feeling the conversation was about dominance. Robert Chen called monthly to check progress. "You sound different, Mrs. Patterson, more settled." "I feel more settled." "That was your son's goal, to help everyone live together with dignity." David had thought of everything, even healing. Some evenings, after the kids were in bed, Jennifer and I would sit in the living room together, not talking much, just sharing the space. It wasn't friendship, but it wasn't warfare either. It was something quieter and more sustainable. The house felt peaceful in a way it never had when I was walking on eggshells. I was home. A year later, Emma graduated middle school with honors. Tyler learned to ride a bike. Jennifer and I attended both events together, celebrating our family. We're not friends, but we've learned to respect each other's place in this family. I think about David often when I'm by the window with morning coffee. He knew that love isn't always enough. Sometimes you need legal documents and clear boundaries. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've been treated like a burden instead of a blessing, know that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. You don't have to accept being diminished by people who should treasure you. You matter. Your comfort matters. Your peace matters. The law exists to protect the vulnerable. Use it if you need to. Your future self will thank you for standing up. If this story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone.